Welcome to another episode of TNT Unpacked. We are your hosts, Justin Collymore and Rochelle Amo.
Hey.
Today we're talking to Catherine McEwan. Is that how you pronounce it?
McEwan, yeah.
McEwan? Excellent.
Yeah, not bad. A lot of people get that wrong.
What do people normally say?
I've heard all sorts. I get a lot of McEwan.
McEwan.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had someone read my name and somehow come out with Makizo, and I'm just like, where?
Makizo sounds like a cool nickname, like if you rode a motorbike or something.
I don't currently ride a motorbike.
No? Is it
so
something in your immediate future for like plans?
in my immediate future, no, but I could definitely see me trying it out.
Yeah.
Like,
I could see it.
So, in
Bikes are
case you're
fun.
wondering at this point who Catherine is, because we clearly have no idea so far, you might have seen her profile on People of Trinidad and Tobago's Facebook page. She spoke in depth about the younger LGBTQ, or do I just say LGBT?
kind of depends on who you're talking to, really. Like,
Okay.
in general, like, once you hit LGB and T, you generally covered your bases
That's
there.
a plus. That's a
Okay,
plus.
that's
Adding the Q is maybe bonus points, but
Yeah.
it really depends.
So I'm going to go with the bonus point. She spoke about being a member of the LGBTQ community in Trinidad and Tobago, especially coming off of the tragedy in Orlando where so many younger members of that community were targeted and died. We just wanted to get her response and get an idea of what the feedback would be from our local community and just talk to her a little bit about what's happening with the younger generation of members. In TNT, this might be a bit of a tricky subject. There are a lot of people who are not going to be pleased that we spoke with a member of the LGBTQ community.
Hey.
She got on fast.
It's me. Surprise.
So we know that you're part of I Am One. What sort of role do you play in the community?
We've basically tasked ourselves with hosting social spaces and promoting the arts community because we have a lot of appreciation for the arts in our group, and we also know a lot of artists in the community. So
Right.
we try to place a lot of emphasis on art and the representation of LGBT voices in art
Right.
and how it can impact culture and change attitudes and that sort of thing. Because I know personally for me, like, I can't speak for everyone else, but when I was growing up, I knew other gay people, I knew other bi people, but I didn't know where they went to hang out. So I know you, and like, I can see you at school, I can hang out with you on the weekends, but where do we go that is safe to be us? There are a few spaces, like there's a couple of gay bars, but not everyone is into that scene. Not everyone wants to go out every
Yeah.
weekend, and like it's not everyone's scene. So we're trying to broaden the scope of where people can go.
Yeah, Rochelle and I both have decided to stop drinking alcohol.
How's that going?
It's been a difficult time.
I wonder what sparked the decision.
We see that you guys have also been part of a Pride Arts Festival that recently passed. Can you tell us some more about that?
Well, that's actually ongoing. Yeah, that started earlier this month and will run until the end of June, beginning of July. And that's basically our baby right now. Last year, we started with a soft launch. We did a couple of events. We had a gallery showing for LGBT artists. We had a little cabaret show. We have a bunch of writers in our immediate circle, and they'd started writing this Calypso cabaret featuring entirely LGBT characters.
Did you just say that you guys have a Calypso cabaret?
Yeah, if you're interested, that's happening like at the very end. That's one of our last events.
For people who might not know what a cabaret is, can you just give us a little bit of detail?
I was not involved in the writing, and I was actually working the door the night they showed it. Well, the night they did the reading of it. But basically, it's a kind of story with a lot of musical styles thrown in, and a lot of the characters will launch into song at different points. Like, it's a bit of a musical.
Right.
Doesn't it get really sexy though? 'Cause I think
It does.
cabaret.
Yeah, there's definitely some pretty sexy comments going on. There's a lot of humor as well. We had some really fantastic reviews last year from people who came just to see their stage reading. We hadn't done a full production.
What kind of turnout do you normally get at something like that?
It really kind of depends. We've had some very good turnouts and we've had some less good ones, which have been a little disappointing, but in general, we've had like events completely fill up. And we've had some events where it's just like people just dropping in and then dropping back out. So it's completely about making something from here, but making it definitively not something that was made to make fun of LGBT people or women or anything like that, because there's a lot of that in Calypso, because it's a boys' club a lot of the time. Yeah. So this we've made for us, showing that this culture is ours too. We can do what we want with it.
That's a good way of putting it, that this culture is ours too.
Ours too, yeah. We were talking earlier about how it's so ironic that a place like Trinidad that is so tolerant and so multicultural has this tension and this, really intense environment for members of the LGBTQ community. And that might be in part because we're still a very religious society. And I don't think people realize or understand that you guys are so much a part of our culture, so responsible for pushing our culture forward. There's no appreciation for that, and there should be.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, but in terms of what you're talking about with like intolerance, in fact, if you ask a lot of other Caribbean nationals, in the same way that some people will tell you, oh, I want to go to America because it's so tolerant there, you'll find that a lot of other smaller islanders come here and they're like, oh, it's so great here, I want to come here because it's good, it's easier to be gay here than it is at home. We were talking about the Pride Arts Festival. We've done a lot of events this past month because it's International Pride Month. You may have heard of the Stonewall riots. That happened in New York City in 1966? 1960s for sure. Yeah, it was a riot predominantly led by black people in New York City who were, a lot of them were transgender, some of them were gay and lesbian, and some were bisexual as well, obviously. They had been going to the Stonewall Inn, which was a mob-owned club which accepted gay patrons, whereas a lot of the other clubs would turn you away. And they used to get a lot of police harassment, police raids, and I believe it was June the 26th, they basically decided they'd had enough and rioted. Pride as an institution started then. There were annual marches to commemorate, and it kind of spread from there. Fairly recently, it's been recognized, June has been recognized as International Pride Month. So we're putting on our events now because of that. So we've been doing dances, we've had an open mic session, which we had a lot of great feedback from. People really wanted to come out to that.
So that would be mostly like spoken word and
we had spoken word, we had people playing guitar. I saw someone leave like towards the end to go out to their car to bring their guitar in. Wow. And tonight we're actually having a drag king show.
No. I heard about one that happened in Chaguaramas. But again, these things always seem a bit under the radar.
Yeah, we do deliberately kind of keep them under the radar because a lot of people are concerned about security. They don't want any and everyone knowing what they're coming for, where they're going, when they're going to be there.
Have there been incidents that you know of where somebody threw an event and it got attacked or something like that?
No, I don't know of events that have had that happen. I do know of individuals who have experienced violence, but in general, I don't know of events. I know a lot of people just really value their privacy. They don't want to draw attention to themselves, which is fair because we don't have any preventions from employment and housing discrimination. So a lot of people like to keep a low profile.
So you mentioned that you guys are doing a lot of stuff. I know this month is Pride Month, so obviously this would be like the peak season, I assume. Are you the boss? Are you the boss of what's going on?
I'm not the boss.
Okay.
We have 4 of us, and we try to keep it on fairly even footing. It kind of depends on what each of us can commit to in terms of time. Up until recently, 2 of us were working full time, and that kind of takes away
I
from...
wondered if everyone's working full-time, how do you all manage?
Currently, one of us is working full-time. Another one of us has a very flexible schedule.
And how do you all like decide what events to do, what things to do? Do you all have like a little council or...
The 4 of us have a group chat. You know, it's the 21st century. WhatsApp group chat.
Council, really?
We have in the past called ourselves a board, but we decided that wasn't actually what we were. So we call ourselves co-directors. There's a couple of us who are already involved in event promotion from before. They tend to have more of the ideas of what they want to do, and there are some of us who are better at just like logistical support.
Sure.
I understand, especially considering the Orlando shooting. A lot of the time, the community, when there are events, would try to keep it below the radar. But do you think that works against its purpose?
It's an issue,
yeah,
for sure. A lot of the way that LGBT-friendly spaces are known about is very much word of mouth. And generally, you have to, like, know someone, but it's got better in recent years because of Facebook. Now anyone can type into the search bar LGBT Trinidad and Tobago and see what pops up. And there's actually several groups. I would say that there's at least 10 and probably more. Some groups that are focused on advocacy, like CAISO. There's some groups that are focused more on social spaces, like us. And there's some groups that do more services. Most of these people have a kind of Facebook presence, and if you know one person, you'll eventually get introduced to all of the others. And if you're in a group on Facebook, we tend to promote our events in these groups.
Do you like spoken word?
Personally, I
lie.
have some friends who are very good spoken word poets, and I will go and support them.
Sure.
But I find that the vast majority of it is not very good.
Yes.
And so I was very pleased to be working the door the night we had ours. I was like, I'm quite happy to support everyone that wants to go up and do their thing.
Right.
Good for you.
But I'll be at the door.
Personally, I'm going to be outside doing my thing.
Justin cannot stand spoken word.
It's not that I can't stand it, it's just so intense. Maybe it is that I can't stand it, though.
I think it is that you can't stand it.
Probably.
Do you prefer poetry, like read poetry?
Yeah.
Like written, yeah.
No offense to anybody who does spoken word.
I mean, I think spoken word is one of those art forms that you have to nail in order for it to be good. You can't half-ass spoken word. It's going to come out like you're stupid.
Yeah, there's some people that are very good at it, and there's some people who are just beginning and don't really know where they're at. And then there's a lot of people who haven't yet found their voice, and so they put on what's called poet voice, and it sounds very generic. Like everyone starts sounding the same. So yeah, it can be a bit irritating.
Is there any community that persons can go to help, for example, with transitioning from not being out in the open to actually being out in the open, where there might be like family backlash, lack of support, you know, that kind of estrangement?
As far as I'm aware, there is group therapy done by the psych ward in Mount Hope, particular to the LGBT community who want to process their own shit about coming out or other family difficulties, anything like that. I know that if you call up CAISO, they will refer you to, they have a social worker on staff, so they can refer you to them. They're also closely associated with Friends for Life, who do a lot of HIV work in particular. They came out of the gay men's community that is strongly affected by the HIV epidemic. So yeah, there are services out there. Admittedly, it can be hard to know where to look. But in general, if you know someone, you can reach out to them. And because Trinidad is a small place and the community is even smaller, it tends to be that someone can know someone who knows someone else who can help.
And I feel like a lot of older members of the community went away because of the pressure of being at home and not being able to be themselves. So they are now listening from abroad and want to know what's happening with the younger generation of the community in Trinidad.
I went away on vacation last year, and because Trini's are fucking everywhere, I went up a mountain in California, and there are like 300 other people. There was another fucking Trini who'd left here when they were 14. They had a really hard time of it, moved to London with family, and then spent the rest of their teenage years there. So they had a pretty decent time once they were out in London because, you know, there's a fairly large community, there's a lot more legal protection, there's known spaces. And then they met me up this mountain in California. Who would know that there would be two Trinidadians?
Two gay Trinidadians.
On a mountain in California.
On a mountain in California.
And they were like, holy shit, there's actual gay people in Trinidad. And I was like, well, yeah, close.
Would you describe yourself as a community leader?
I wouldn't call myself a leader. I wouldn't say that I do a lot of leadership work, but I have a lot of recognition. I have a lot of permission to be out.
Right.
Because of that, because so many people recognize me from UE or recognize me from having gone to school with me or just fucking recognize me because there aren't that many white people. I'm just fairly well known.
Right.
I'm a pretty popular person in that sense.
Do you use it to your advantage? Like when you go to like a party or cabaret, do you skip the line?
Oh,
Every once in a while.
we don't have a lot of lines.
Oh, okay.
We wanted to know, do you experience a lot of backlash from other members of the business community? For example, if you're looking for a venue to host something or you're looking for a supplier, or do you find a lot of cooperation?
Well, in general, we tend to use spaces that are owned and operated by LGBT people. So we tend to have a fairly good relationship. We've experienced a lot of generosity from spaces, like, because we'll go to them and say, we want to use your space, we're going to be hosting XYZ. And they'll say, okay, sure. Then we'll say, okay, so what are your rates? What's the space rental going to be like? And they're like, just pay us for equipment.
Yeah.
And we're like, wow, that's really generous of you. So we've actually run into that quite a lot. A lot of spaces have been very generous to us, and we're really appreciative of that.
Basically, you kind of keep it in the community when you do business and when you do events.
Yeah, we're trying to build relationships within the community itself, build connections between different venues and different promoters. And personally, I find that it's a very patchwork system. Like, there's the people who go to this space and there's the people who go to these parties. And we're trying to bridge the gap, make it a connected situation rather than the patchwork it currently is.
Yeah, because that's how you get that kind of power as a community to create change. You have to be together.
Yeah, we're not personally invested in doing the advocacy work. We have some very talented political advocates out there who do some really amazing work and who I have personally learned a lot from. But it's not really our style, but we definitely recognize that having a stronger community gives us a lot more power.
Yeah. And do you get a lot of feedback from members of the community saying, you know, this has really made me feel more welcomed and more comfortable, etc.?
We've had a fair few people come out and say that. We've even had some parents approach us and be like, oh, I didn't know that there were people I could go to talk about my son's just come out, or my son's getting shit at school because people think he's gay. My daughter is like struggling. We've had parents come to us and say, oh, we didn't know that there were people out there that we could talk to. Yeah. So that's been pretty gratifying.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that you and your colleagues, you'll probably get a great sense of pride and fulfillment from doing this because y'all are doing so many good things for so many people and it's really having, you know, a tangible impact.
Yeah, one of the rewarding parts for me is meeting new people and having them say, oh, I'm so glad I was able to meet new people from this.
When we're talking about pride, I feel like a lot of people get confused because we use the term pride to describe that movement of the LGBT community to kind of own their space in society and kind of push for tolerance and acceptance and integration. And people think of it as, you know, you're trying to shove your agenda down my throat and you're trying to put all your business in the streets and I don't want to know about that and you need to keep it to yourself and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's important for people to understand that when we talk about pride in any community, whether it's ethnic or whether it's sexual, you're really pushing for the right to live as a human being as yourself. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I guess what you're asking is why pride?
Yeah,
like
my
interpretation of it.
That was
Why?
the most long question I've ever heard in my life.
Like, why do we have pride celebrations? Well,
Rochelle, we spoke about this.
I know, I'm sorry. I tried. I'm sorry.
when you're growing up as a young lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender person, there's first realizing that that's who you are can be a pretty scary sensation because it's realizing that you are definitely different from the people around you and not different in a good way. I love being gay, like would not change that. Straight shit sounds awful. So personally, I would not want to be straight ever at all. Like, you can keep that. I'm real good.
I find it being a little biased right now. We're trying to work against prejudice.
Yeah, okay.
Catherine, what are you doing?
But no, a lot of people, when they're first coming out, think, oh, shit, this is my life now. I have to deal with this. Like, I can personally talk about how when I started realizing, oh, I'm into girls, I was like, but is this something I really have to deal with? Can I just, like, know that I like girls, but also like never actually deal with it. And just like, I'll just date men. That'll be fine. And no, it was not fine.
So wait, did you try or?
When I was younger, I definitely did identify as bisexual, and that was real for the time that it was. I later came out as a lesbian. So for me, it was just, while I was a teenager, definitely I was experiencing connections with different genders and the same gender. But since basically coming to adulthood, I've realized that I'm not interested in men.
Sure.
So it was kind of like a transitionary phase.
For me personally, for other people, it's not. I have bisexual friends who are definitely bisexual and have always been bisexual. Yeah. There's a lot of, oh shit, this isn't good. How do I deal with being this? And no one likes this. Like, why am I this? Yeah. And then there's a lot of shame. So a lot of us growing up, coming out, you don't immediately unlearn that shame. You still have internalized a lot of it, and it results in a lot of self-policing. Some people who haven't unpacked their internalized homophobia end up like really treating their partners badly because they haven't really dealt with the fact that they're gay, and they end up just treating their partners like awfully, and it ends up being really unhealthy for the individual. So pride is about concentrated effort to overcome that shame and say there's nothing wrong with me, and to mean it, and to tell other people there is nothing wrong with who I am.
Powerful message.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about how negative of an effect that kind of institutionalized shame has on people. And you did mention in your People of Trinidad and Tobago profile that you had 2 pairs who committed suicide.
I have known people who've committed suicide, who've died by suicide. This wasn't a boy that I personally knew, but he was my age. He would have been someone that I met later in life who died by suicide. His name was George Kazanjian. He was a student at CIC.
Yeah, I remember this, yeah.
Friends and peers of his eventually started the Silver Lining Foundation, which works as an anti-bullying group and particularly focuses on building safe spaces for LGBT youth.
When you see things like bullying, I mean, I understand that would probably make you upset, but does it sort of give you that drive to work harder at what you do?
There's certainly some anger in my drive to participate in community, because getting to the point where I can say to myself, no, this is who I am and there is nothing wrong with who I am, and being surrounded by people who also believe that, there's definitely a part of me that says, I don't want any other child to go through that.
Yeah.
I don't want any single other youth to have to go through even what I did. And like, I've had it easy by comparison to a lot of people.
Yeah.
As an aside, you kept talking about, you have this androgynous look, and people keep asking you, okay, what are you, a girl or a boy?
Yeah.
What do you identify as?
Personally, I don't really have an internal sense of like being a man or being a woman. I don't really see myself as a gendered being, but of course, people on the outside will gender me all the time. If I had to absolutely come down, I would say that I'm not interested in being a man. The closest thing I can get to what a gender identity would be for me is butch lesbian. Right. I identify myself as a masculine lesbian.
I thought that was like a offensive term, butch lesbian.
No, it's a community term. We use it.
I know, I just thought it was offensive. Like lipstick lesbian and butch lesbian, like those things are fine to say out loud in public.
Yeah, I mean, like, watch your audience,
right.
And like, don't assign it to someone without asking them how they want to be referred to.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with it. I know people who call themselves butch. I know people who call themselves femme. I know people who just don't call themselves anything.
Right. So I just wanted to ask, because I feel like you said you have to check with people about what they identify as before you assign things to them. And I think that's important when it comes to being able to operate in terms of integrating our society. Like me working with you, me speaking to you, it makes it a little bit harder for me as a straight person who's not a part of the community to identify and relate to you if I don't know what you identify as. And it's sometimes people feel really shy and they're like, I don't want to just ask her or ask him what to say. Like, do I say him? Do I say her? Like, what? Like, people feel ashamed, but I think it's useful to make that inquiry so then you can go forward with the relationship and understand how to relate to that person.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a time and place. Like, make sure that you're not asking personal questions for what is otherwise a professional relationship.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
make sure that your relationship is at that level, but otherwise, feel free to ask questions respectfully. And people can tell when you're coming from a respectful place. People will know if you're just asking because you want to know. Like, it's your personal curiosity, and it's not because you're looking to have a better relationship with them.
Yeah.
So if you're coming from a good place, like, people really aren't going to mind.
So coming off of that note, are there some things that straight people do that annoy you? That you want to let us know?
Are there some things that straight people do that annoy me? Is water wet?
Give us some big things.
Oh, give us some
Your top three.
big
Top three,
things.
top three.
All right. Well, big things as of this week, I guess.
Wow, okay.
Because
Changes every week.
it depends on what I'm up against. This week has been particularly hard for people in the LGBT community. The mass shooting of 49 Latinx individuals in Florida,
Yeah.
and the injuring of 53 more, many of whom who will probably permanently suffer from this, has been a lot for us to take on. And we've had varying responses, and it's been interesting to see how straight people have responded to it. So, top 3 pet peeves this week, particularly about the response to Orlando, has been myself and a lot of my friends have found that our straight friends and family haven't reached out to us to ask, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, this was a targeted attack. Are you feeling okay? And a lot of straight people have just not recognized that maybe this was also traumatic for us. Second thing that I've seen has been straight people who are otherwise homophobic, who are saying, oh, I'm so sorry they died. That was so terrible. No one should get killed for who they are. Fuck you. You have been contributing to this all along. You've
Yeah.
been dehumanizing and devaluing LGBT lives. Fuck you. Fuck your sympathy. In particular, like, one of the major figures has been Dr. Keith Rowley's statement that he put out into the general public, I guess, after issuing to the states, was his message contained no mention of the fact that this was a targeted attack against the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And his sympathy is hurtful. More than it feels good, it hurts. It hurts to have someone who's said, I don't want to deal with your rights, they're just fashionable.
Yeah.
I don't want to, like, I'm not going to talk about that because, you know, it's the topic of the day. It's not important to me. Clearly you don't value LGBT lives, so
Yeah.
this sympathy doesn't feel genuine.
It's almost insulting. that somebody
It's
would have
absolutely
sympathy, yeah.
insulting. When I first saw that statement, I was enraged. I was shaking. Third thing, I guess, that straight people have been pissing me off with this week is insisting on referring to LGBT people as living a lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle. LGBT people live very diverse lives, have very diverse hobbies and interests. Like, even the grouping LGBT, there's 4 different groups in there who have 4 different experiences.
Yeah.
Lesbians have a different experience to gay men. Bisexual people, in that you can subgroup it into bisexual women and bisexual men, who both have different experiences of being bisexual. And transgender people, which you can again group into transgender women and transgender men, who both have very different experiences of their lives. And it's just such a broad group, and calling it a lifestyle just ends up normalizing heterosexuality in a way that ultimately devalues other
Yeah,
experiences.
because it's kind of like you're either heterosexual or you're those other things.
Yeah, it's either you're normal or you chose to be a deviant.
Yeah.
And it's like, excuse you.
Yeah. The shooting that happened in Orlando, how did the I Am One group react to that?
I think it was me and one of my co-directors who had seen it first, and I was the first one to bring it up in the group chat, and I was saying, because I woke up on Sunday morning basically to it. That was the first news I heard. I shared it in our group chat, and I said, we need to put out a solidarity message, because, you know, I immediately recognized this was an attack at a gay club. This targeted LGBT community people. So we put out a statement, and since then we've all kind of been dealing with it in our own way. It kind of threw us a lot. I know a couple of my co-directors just turned off social media. They were like, no, I can't deal with this right now. I need to be off on my own and deal with it myself. I know I dealt with it by like seeking out other friends and commiserating and talking about the news. It's been varied responses, however we personally wanted to deal with it.
Your first pet peeve about people not reaching out, straight people not reaching out to you to make sure you were okay. A lot of people had the opinion, well, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It was all the way in Orlando and it doesn't affect you. I was following the story and I saw this clip of this guy who had escaped. He got shot in the back and the New York Times interviewed him. And one of the last things he said was that, you know, so many people from all around the world had reached out to him and shared his support. And he said, yes, it might not have happened in the same place that you live in or the same part of the world that you're in, and you might not be part of the community, but please know that this affects each and every one of us. And please, as a human being, like, thank you for saying that. And I think that's the same attitude that maybe the straight people who are pissing you off need to adopt, because it's on a human level. This kind of targeting is not right. If it were targeting a black club, it would be a whole different story, right?
I think it's just ignorance of not belonging to a community like that. A lot of LGBT people, like, it is about the community. It is about finding people like yourself. And there's a lot of exchange between LGBT communities here and LGBT communities abroad, because so much of the LGBT media that you can consume is produced abroad. Most of us feel some kind of connection to other LGBT people out there. And there's definitely a recognition that the kind of violence that occurred in Orlando is connected to the everyday violence we experience. Going out on the street and being harassed because you don't look like a straight woman. That's connected to the violence that was enacted in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And I find that a lot of straight people think that, oh, you know, I would never wish death on someone. Just my not understanding of LGBT people and my thinking that it's abnormal or a lifestyle, like, that's not connected to the violence that was experienced. And it's that kind of ignorance that just allows it to continue. It's not recognizing the connection between that kind of subtle devaluation and the larger violence that can be enacted because of that. In the same ways that if you subtly devalue the lives of black people by saying you are all these stereotypes.
Can I touch your hair?
Yeah, that. It's just subtly saying, you know, you're not quite human enough.
And then finding that balance between not devaluing people but still reaching out to learn and understand and have that solidarity with them. I think it comes down to respect, like you were saying.
Yeah, it's absolutely about respect. Yeah. It's just fundamentally recognizing that this is another human being in front of you, and just because their experience is not your own doesn't mean that their experience is somehow lesser.
Do you think that this generation will be the one to successfully build an inclusive community in TNT?
I'm definitely hopeful about it, and I have seen how things have changed in just the 10 years or so that I have been aware of myself as a gay person and other people. So I've seen gradual shift that I think points towards much more openness. I've seen a lot of my friends able to come out to their parents and have a relationship with them. And it's not perfect. A lot of these parents, you know, aren't really sure what to do with having a gay kid because they didn't plan for it. I don't really know what your life is, but okay, you're my kid, so I guess we're sticking this out.
Yeah. From what I can observe, there seems to be more openness about it. People seem to be more comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah, I would say that there is. I think that more people feel more comfortable coming out. And that's partially because they can see it abroad. They know what's possible. The internet is a great place in that way. Like, we can see on the same day that marriage equality happened in the States, even though that's not something that we're pushing for here, even though that's not something that is even on our radar, but we can see that, oh, that's a possibility. That's something that can happen. Things do change. I would say there's a lot of hope out there right now. And there's also a lot of external pressure, like a lot of the EU governments and the US government are all very gung-ho about supporting LGBT initiatives. There's a fair bit of funding being put in place, people saying, oh, you're an LGBT organization, would you like to do this work for us?
Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts?
Anybody you want to shout out? Any Anything you want to promote?
Anybody want to big up
You wanna big up?
from Tacarigua?
Scrapes Car Wash in Tacarigua.
They're actually in Trin City.
Oh,
I will
sorry,
have you
sorry.
know.
God, you can't even stop.
West people.
Let's talk about. This is where I really wanted to talk about today. The difference between Tacarigua and Trin City. Let's go.
The difference between Tacarigua and Trin City. Well, Tacarigua is much more centered around the main road.
Right.
Trin City is much more around Dinsley Main Road and the environment of Trin City Mall.
Right.
The fact that a white non-Trinidadian accent had to explain that to you, Justin, is so embarrassing. I literally cannot even.
Rochelle, don't devalue me. I know things. I know things.
Some things, occasionally.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for unpacking the LGBT community in TNT.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been amazing learning and getting that perspective.
We're willing to have allies on board.
Great.
Excellent.
All right.
Catherine, we've touched on a lot of different things today, and I hope that everybody listening has a greater understanding of your group and the whole community. And I just want to thank you again for giving that to us, and hopefully we can talk to you again.
You're welcome.